Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Okay, so today we are diving into a really wild idea, one that comes from a super unexpected place. We're going to talk about what our cities could learn from cruise ships. Yeah, you heard that right, cruise ships.
But wait, hold on. Before you start picturing some kind of perfect city floating on the ocean, you need to know where the author of our source material, a guy named Phil Warnath, kicks things off. He starts with this incredibly brutal take. He calls them the coffins of the sea. I mean, wow. It really doesn't get more scaling than that.
So, that brings up the big question, right? If these things are basically floating symbols of everything that's wrong with tourism, why on earth are we even talking about them? Well, that's the whole mystery we're going to unravel in this explainer. And trust me, the answer is probably not what you're expecting.
All right, section 1, let's start with that brutal take. We need to get really clear on all the negatives first, because believe me, the author does not pull any punches.
So, in his view, they're the absolute peak of this off-the-shelf convenience culture. A totally zero-effort vacation that has this massive long-term environmental cost, and he argues really symbolizes a kind of societal decay. And let's be honest, you can totally see where he's coming from. It's a pretty easy viewpoint to understand. But this is where the whole story pivots.
And that pivot brings us right to the secret of their appeal. See, instead of just looking down on people who love going on cruises, the author does something much more interesting. He gets curious. He asks a way more powerful question: why? Why do so many people crave this specific experience?
And here's the hypothesis he lands on. What if the pull, the magnetism of a cruise ship, isn't really about the ocean or the all-you-can-eat buffets? What if it's about something that's missing from our day-to-day lives? Could it be an escape? An escape from the loneliness and isolation that's literally built into the design of our towns and our sprawling suburb?
And when you really dug into it, he found something fascinating. It's not about the glamour. It's not about luxury. No, the real appeal boils down to 3 simple but super powerful ingredients: accessibility, affordability, and maybe the most important one of all, community.
And this quote, man, it just nails the point. It's from a vlogger who's on a 1-star cruise, not a 5-star, a 1-star. And listen to what they have: a spa, a restaurant, a pizzeria, a casino, a disco, an arcade, a jogging track, a theater, even a chapel. It's all right there. Everything you could possibly need is just a quick walk down a hallway.
So, this incredible density, this is what leads us to the big idea of this whole explainer. It's time to stop thinking about a cruise ship as just a big boat. We need to start seeing it for what it really is: a model for a city, a complete city, in a box.
Yeah, think of it like a zipped file on your computer, but instead of data, it's a whole city. Now, the author is the first to admit it's got huge flaws, okay? It's not green, it's totally dependent on the mainland for everything, but he says, let's just put all that aside for 1 second. Let's just focus on the absolute genius of its layout.
He actually uses this great kind of funny analogy to explain it. He says that, just like cats, sometimes we humans also prefer to sit in a box. It's not about being trapped. It's about that deep comfort and profound ease that comes from having everything you need just right there. Okay, so let's make this really concrete. How does this city in a box idea actually stack up against the way a lot of us live every single day? This is where the comparison gets really, really interesting. All right, so look at this. On one side, you've got the cruise ship. Your home, it's a compact cabin. Your highways, they're just hallways, and almost all the space is for shared stuff: pools, theaters, restaurants. Then, on the other side, you've got suburban sprawl. Huge houses, each with its own private lawn, its own driveway, all connected by these massive, inefficient roads made for cars. You see the difference? One is fundamentally designed for efficiency and bumping into people. The other, well, it's designed for isolation.
What we're talking about here, this cruise ship model, is pretty much a floating version of a concept you might have heard of called the 15-minute city. It's this whole urban planning idea that says everything you need for daily life, groceries, your job, parks, a place to eat, should all be within a quick 15-minute walk or bike ride from your front door.
Now, it's important to note, this idea isn't loved by everybody. The author points out that it can be pretty controversial. It sometimes gets framed as some kind of conspiracy, and he attributes that to, in his words, people who are afraid of any change. Okay, so what?
If the cruise ship is some kind of blueprint, what are we supposed to do with it? How do we actually take these lessons we've learned from the so-called coffin of the sea and use them back here on dry land?
Well, the author's call to action for urban planners, designers, and politicians is actually super clear. He says, number 1, we have to actively fight against inefficient urban sprawl. Number 2, we've got to be radically intentional with how we plan and use our space. And number 3, we need to design everything to prioritize shared spaces, places for recreation, for connection, for being human together.
And look, this isn't just some fantasy, some theoretical dream. The author points to actual, real-world examples of success. He points to countries like the Netherlands, Singapore, Estonia, Switzerland, places that prove you absolutely can build dense, connected, and really amazing places that people want to live in.
So you see, in the end, this was never really about cruise ships, was it? It's about learning to see the world around us with fresh eyes. It's about asking a really tough question. What is our built environment doing for us? And what is it doing to us? And that leaves us with one last question, just for you. If you were the architect, if you had all the power, what's the very first thing you would change about your own neighborhood to help bring people just a little bit closer together? Think about it. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.